it's not enough to say change is everywhere, change is constant. And even conceptually, as an academic exercise, well, in change or in a breakdown, there's a breakthrough, or one door closes, another one opens, or there's opportunity and uncertainty and all this stuff. And, when people are in the middle of like a real crisis, chaos, a swirl, a storm, personal, professional, both, we're not like stopping everything and just going, hey, I'm in a swirl. There's an opportunity here. But how do we get there?
Yeah. Well, and that's the essence of a lot of my work. And I mean, you've packed like 10 questions in right there, which I love. And even just this idea of change being this one word or this one thing. Like I hear from people pretty much every day. Some of them are like, I love change. Change is amazing. And other people are like, I hate change. It's horrible. It's hard. And it's like, it's both of those things and more. But like, what do we mean when we say change? And so a lot of my work unpacks the language of change, how we communicate it, how we think about it, how we show up for it, right? There's also the cultures of change. How are we taught to see change? And a lot of it, I mean, it's not taught in classrooms. What are the things we picked up from our family, our community, our environment? All of the things that shape how we see change and uncertainty in the unknown. But guess what? We don't typically talk about it. It's not on our resume. We do not know this about our colleagues. And yet, another way I like to phrase this is you have change at work, how people show up for a change at work, whether it's professional, career, organizational, strategy, you name it. A lot of the ways that people show up to change at work aren't actually about work. They're about this broader cultural container, their expectations, their norms, all of that. And similarly, when change happens at work, a lot of that splashes out into things that are beyond work, right? They affect your family relationship. And so I'm looking at the nexus of all of this, and I'm looking at it very much from the perspective of business, leadership, teamwork, strategy, organizational change and transformation. But you can't do that well unless you really get into the more personal human, the human dimension of change is everything that I do. But really, you can't have the professional growth without the personal growth as well. Right. And so I love that because there's a beautiful kind of toggling between.
Yeah. And the toggle is, take that a little bit further, because there's internal and external. There's natural growth. You're in primary school, elementary school, and you can move on and get advanced degrees. So there's growth and change that is a natural kind of pathway. And then there's externalities, whether it's a weather incident or, God forbid, a death in the family, which God forbid, but it does happen, or people move, or all sorts of external changes. And then reconciling it, we're taught in many ways consistency, predictability, irregularity, having habits. But the world isn't like that. There's constant change. There's constant inputs that are out of our control. So, take us further on that road.
Yeah, well, if I may, I'll just use my own story. And I want to come back to the habits and the practices that you mentioned, because those are actually really important. A lot of people don't have them, but we have 100% control over whether and how we gain them. So I want to come back to that because that's also core to my work. But just my own instance, and you referenced it, and I know this is tricky territory, but obviously it's key to what I do. That for me, so for many years, and this is speaking and advising and doing all these different things around change and uncertainty. And people would look at my resume and say, "Oh yeah, strategy." Like they could map out the credentials and so forth. But they were like, "But what really is it about this Flux stuff? Like, where does this really begin?" And I realized that while it's a story that I've always been very open to sharing and know it's been important to my life, it wasn't on my resume. Many people didn't know this about me. But when I go back and say, where does my interest in all of this begin? It's not the organizational transformation. It's not the business and the leadership. That's all important. Yeah. But for me, my entry into the world in Flux happened long ago. I was 20. I was at university and I was overseas. So I was halfway around the world and I got the phone call that no one expects to get, wants to get, thinks they're going to get. I was 20 years old and I got a phone call that both of my parents had died in a car crash. Both of them. Now, you can imagine, like, my world just flipped upside down. Everything about my world just, right? Family, sense of identity, sense of self, support system, my ideas about my career, the future, like it
Yeah.
all just melted. And so that is when my journey to Flux began. Now I've been walking this walk, talking this talk, practicing, researching, paying really close attention ever since. But I bring that up because that is what drives what I do. And that's the kind of quote unquote experience I bring to these conversations. Because
Yeah.
we can research in books and labs and all that, and that's important work to do. But when it comes down to it and kind of coming full circle, I still remember the first time I told that story on stage. I was quite afraid because I wasn't sure if people would take me as seriously.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if they would it challenge my credibility. Da, da, da.
Well, what did you find? You found that
Oh, I
people
found
did take you seriously.
that is probably, you can look at my resume and the degrees and all that sort of stuff. My single greatest source of credibility is my own human lived experience. And so the thing that I was most hesitant about, actually from that point forward, it like blew the doors off that people, and I do a lot of work with executives and leadership teams, and they're like, that's what we want to talk more about.
Yeah.
That's what we don't know about each
Yeah.
other. That's the missing piece of the puzzle.